Hey to all the spooks out there. Welcome back to another episode of Spine Chilling Chats, where every Wednesday we dig up the darkest corners of true crime, history, folklore, and the supernatural. I'm Ange.
And I'm Amanda.
Before we dive into today's twisted tale, we wanted to take a moment to recognize that May is Mental Health Awareness Month.
Yep, and while we love diving into the chilling and bizarre, we also know that real life struggles can be even scarier. Mental health is so important, and this month is all about breaking the silence, showing support, and reminding each other that it's okay to ask for help.
If you or someone you love is struggling, please know you're not alone, and there is help. In the U.S., you can call or text the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline anytime, 24/7. It's free and it's confidential.
If you're outside the United States, there are resources too. In the UK, you can contact Samaritans at 116-123. In Canada, you can call Talk Suicide Canada at 1-833-456-4566. And for a global list of helplines, you can visit findahelpline.com.
Whether you need someone to talk to or just a little reminder that you're valued, please reach out. Your mental health matters. Now take care of yourselves because while we love giving you chills, we also care about your well-being.
Yes, we do. And on that note, let's get into today's spine chilling story.
So previously on Spine Chilling Chats, the Donner Party set out with dreams of a better life, but a disastrous decision, take an untested shortcut, led them into a frozen nightmare. Trapped by relentless snow in the Sierra Nevada, tensions rose, supplies vanished, and desperation took hold. One group, the Forlorn Hope, braved the mountains on makeshift snowshoes to seek help. Some made it out, many didn't. Now, in part 2, we return to Truckee Lake, where those left behind are cold, starving, and losing hope by the hour. What happens when the line between life and death blurs, and survival demands the unthinkable? In late October, James Reed made it out of the Sierra Nevada into Rancho Johnson after being banished from this group. James now could recover safely at Sutter's Fort, but the constant fear for the welfare of his family weighed on him. He begged Colonel John C. Fremont to get a team together to form a rescue mission through the pass to save the rest of the party. He promised to join Colonel Fremont's men and fight the Mexican-American War as repayment for saving his group. I was just talking to Robbie earlier about this, and it just blows my mind that, okay, so this is 1847.
Mm-hmm.
That's really not that long ago. Like, that's 90 years before his grandma was born. Like, that's not crazy long ago.
No, I don't feel like it is.
And then to think that, our country wasn't even the country that we know it as today.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we were fighting for land still.
Yeah.
To gain parts that were controlled by Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's just, it's mind-boggling.
Yeah, because it doesn't seem like, it seems like they had, tuberculosis running crazy and electricity was not invented yet, was it? In 1847?
I don't know.
And then just the huts that they were living in while they were doing this traveling, and they were traveling by wagon and horse. Like, it just seems like all that shit is still fairly new.
It says electricity wasn't invented in a single moment, but rather discovered and developed gradually over centuries by various scientists and inventors. Early observations of static electricity and lightning date back to ancient times, blah, 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 blah. Benjamin Franklin's experiments with lightning in 1752, Alessandro Volta's invention of the battery in 1800, and Thomas Edison's development of a practical incandescent light bulb and power distribution system in 1870s to 1880s. So
it doesn't seem like it's that long ago. Like, everything's still new.
Yeah, that was just crazy. It blew my mind. I wish I had paid attention more
in history
because
they don't cover that anymore. They don't cover that shit in history.
I don't know.
They don't do any of that.
Well, and Like when you're a kid, you don't care about this shit. But as you get older, like history is fascinating to me
I'm a
now. And
history buff. Man, I love history and I love learning about history. Like, it's crazy.
I wish I had paid attention more. Anywho, William McCutcheon joined James along with some of the members of the Harlan Young Party, which was the group that made it through right before their group. William had been unable to return with Charles Stanton and had remained at Sutter's Fort because he was just worn out from that travel. The Harlan Young wagon train was the last group to make it over the Sierra Nevada that season and had arrived at Sutter's Fort on October 8th. So they just made it before the snow. The rescue party consisted of around 30 horses and a dozen men carried food and supplies. They thought they'd find the Donner Party on the western side of the mountain, along Bear River, below the steep approach to Emigrant Gap. They assumed they'd be starving, but alive. That all went to shit when they arrived in the river valley and found only a migrant couple who had been separated from their group and were near starvation. James and William were left by their two guides with some of their horses to press on farther up the valley to Yuba Bottoms. They had to walk the last miles on foot. The men looked up at Emigrant Gap, only 12 miles from the top, which was now blocked by snow. Possibly on the same day, the Breens had attempted to lead one last effort to crest the pass from the east. Despairingly, they turned back to Sutter's Fort. It was impassable. Most of the military in California were busy fighting in the Mexican-American War, along with the men that were in good enough shape to help. The area had blocked roads, compromised communication, and supplies were almost non-existent. Out of all the men in the region, only 3 responded to the call for volunteers to rescue the Donner Party. 3.
Wow.
Due to regional uprisings and confusion everywhere, James Reed was stuck in San Jose until February. The people of San Jose created a petition to the United States Navy to assist the people stuck at Truckee Lake. 2 different local newspapers even reported that members of the Snowshoe Party had already resorted to cannibalism, which helped foster sympathy for those that were still trapped. Even the residents of Yerba Buena, who many were recent migrants themselves, raised $1,300, which would be almost $44,000 in 2024. They also organized relief efforts to build 2 camps to supply a rescue mission for the refugees. On February 4th, a rescue party including William Eddy started from the Sacramento Valley. They were delayed several days due to rain in a rising river. William stationed himself at Bear Valley, while others made slow but steady progress through the snow and storms to cross the pass to Truckee Lake. They set up food stations along the way so they did not have to carry it all, like just little stands or hidden little places with food along the way. 3 men of the rescue party turned back, leaving 7 to trudge on. The 7 men left scaled Fremont Pass, which is now known as Donner Pass, on February 18th. As they got closer to where William Eddy told them the cabins would be, the party started to shout. An emaciated Mrs. Murphy appeared from a hole in the snow, stared at them, and asked, and this is a quote, "Are you men from California, or do you come from heaven?" You can just imagine the feeling after thinking you're just going to die there.
Yeah, absolutely.
To see somebody. Like you think you're hallucinating. The rescue party handed out small portions of food so as to not shock the system of those starved. The cabins were buried in snow, sodden oxhide roofs had begun to rot, and the smell was overwhelming.
Ugh.
I mean, you can imagine. Ugh. 13 people at the camps were dead, their bodies loosely buried in the snow near the cabin roofs, because that's how tall it was. That's how deep crazy. The snow was. Some of the migrants seemed crazed. 3 men of the rescue team headed to the Donner camp and brought back 4 gaunt children and 3 adults. Leanna Donner had particular difficulty walking up the steep incline from Alder Creek to Truckee Lake. Later writing, and this is a quote, "Such pain and misery as I endured that day is beyond description. George Donner's arm was so gangrenous he could not move. Out of 56 people, 23 were chosen to go with the rescue party. 21 remained in the cabins at Truckee Lake and 12 at Alder Creek." The fate of the snowshoe party was kept from those being rescued, lying and telling them that they had not returned because they were frostbitten. Patty and Tommy Reed were soon too weak to cross the snowdrifts. No one had the strength left to carry them either. Margaret Reed accompanied her 2 older children to Bear Valley and suffered the heartbreak of watching her other 2 children be taken back to Truckee Lake without a parent. She made one of the rescuers, Aquila Glover, swear on his honor as a Mason that he would return for her children. Patty told her mother, and this is a quote, "Well, Mother, if you never see me again, do the best you can." Upon their return to the lake, the Breens refused them entry to their cabin. But after Glover left more food, the children were grudgingly allowed in, which is really fucking shitty.
Yeah. Yeah. They're children.
I can understand that you're scared for your own life and your children's lives, but how do you? That would be such an impossible thing to choose to do. Like, because you don't want to hurt your own kids by allowing them to join you, but how do you turn them away?
Right.
To the sorrow of the rescue party, they found that the first food station they had set up had been broken into by animals, leaving them without food for 4 miserable days. After they struggled on the walk over the pass, John Denton slipped into a coma and passed away. Ada Keysberg soon followed after. Ada's mother was inconsolable, refusing to leave the child's body behind. After several more days of travel through rough terrain, the rescuers grew worried that the children would not survive the rescue. Some of them ate the buckskin fringe from one of the rescuers' pants and the shoelaces of another. The rescuers were shocked that they would eat the very clothing they were wearing. They were just that hungry. Like they would eat anything they could
digest, really.
Yeah. On their way down from the mountains, they met the next rescue party, which included James Reed himself. Upon hearing his voice, Margaret Reed sank into the snow, her body losing all of its strength, and suddenly overwhelmed with everything they had been through. Like, oh, I can't imagine to hear your husband's voice after...
Yeah, after not... For how long it's been?
Yeah, months.
And going through what you went through?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
After that first group of rescued migrants made it into Bear Valley, William Hook, Jacob Donner's stepson, broke into food stores, eating until he died.
Oh.
You may be wondering how eating could have killed him. I actually did know this was a thing. Mm-hmm. It's called refeeding syndrome. Basically, after the body has been starved or malnourished for some time, it is no longer able to digest safely and process the nutrients that are being taken in. So the food has to be introduced very slowly and in really small amounts to help build up to eating normally again. Mm-hmm. Eating too much too quickly causes an electrolyte imbalance, which can cause neurologic, pulmonary, cardiac, neuromuscular, and hematologic symptoms, many of which, if severe enough, may result in death. Unfortunately, that's what happened to poor starved William Hook. The others continued to Sutter's Fort, where Virginia Reed wrote, quote, "I really thought I had stepped over into paradise," which I can imagine it was just such a change from a just death and snow everywhere. Mm-hmm. She noted that she found it amusing that one of the young men asked her to marry him, even though she was only 13 and recovering from starvation. She, of course, turned him down.
I mean, I get everything you've been through, but that's still a little much.
Yeah, that's... Plus, she must stink.
Oh,
And they probably all stink back then.
yeah, probably.
Everybody's got their own kind of funk going on. Around the same time that the first rescue party was being organized, George C. Yount, who was a California settler and had likely heard the news of the poor Donner Party, had upsetting dreams of a struggling group of starving pioneers in deep snow. Yount, Mariano Guadalupe Vallejo, and others worked together to raise another $500 to send out another rescue team. The second rescue party arrived at Truckee Lake on March 1st. Among the rescuers was veteran mountain man John Turner, along with James Reed and William McCutcheon. McCutcheon.
I just think it's a funny name. McCutcheon. Whatever. It's funny.
James was reunited with his daughter Patty and son Tommy. The occupants of Breen Cabin were relatively well, but the Murphy Cabin, according to author George R. Stewart, passed the limits of description and almost of imagination. Lavina Murphy was caring for her 8-year-old son, Simon, and the 2 younger children of William, Eddie, and Foster. Her physical and mental health had deteriorated immensely, and she was nearly blind. The children were listless and had not been cleaned in days. Probably more like months.
Yeah.
I
would say longer than days.
Louis Keseberg had moved in, but could barely move because of an injured leg. Surprisingly enough, no one at Truckee Lake had died between the time of the first rescue party left and the second party arrived. Patrick Breen documented a disturbing visit in the last week of February from Mrs. Murphy, who said her family was considering eating Milt Elliott. James Reed and William McCutcheon found Milt's mutilated body. The Alder Creek camp fared no better. The first 2 members of the rescue party to reach the camp were met with the shocking scene. Jean-Baptiste Trudeau was walking carrying a severed human leg. When they made their presence known, he threw the leg into a hole in the snow that contained the mostly dismembered body of Jacob Donner. Inside the tent, they found Elizabeth Donner, who had refused to eat, and her children, who were in better shape from the nourishment their father's body had provided them. The rescuers found 3 more bodies had been already consumed. In the other tent, Tamsin Donner was well, but George was very ill. The infection that started in his hand from being cut earlier had moved up his arm and into his shoulder by this point. The second rescue team evacuated 17 migrants from Truckee Lake. Only 3 of them were adults. Both the Breen and Graves families prepared to go. Only 5 people remained at Truckee Lake: Keseberg, Mrs. Murphy, and her son Simon, and the young Edie and Foster children. Tamsin Donner chose to stay with her husband George after James Reed informed her that a 3rd rescue party would arrive soon. Mrs. Donner kept her daughters Eliza, Georgia, and Frances with her as well. Their journey back to Bear Valley was a slow go. James Reed sent 2 men ahead to get some food from the first stash, expecting that the 3rd rescue team, led by Selim E. Woodworth, would be coming at any moment. But a violent blizzard arose after they had scaled the pass. Poor little 5-year-old Isaac Donner froze to death, and James Reed nearly died himself. Mary Donner's feet were badly burned because they were so frostbitten that she had not realized she was sleeping with them in an actual fire.
Oh my gosh.
When the storm passed, the Breens and Graves families were too exhausted and starved to move. No one had eaten for days. The rescue team had no choice but to leave them behind. The site where the Breens and the Graves had been left became known as Starved Camp. Margaret Breen reportedly took the role as leader when the others headed down the mountain in an effort to keep everyone else alive. However, Elizabeth Graves and her son Franklin soon passed away. The remaining members of Starved Camp consumed their flesh as a means to survive. 3 members of the relief party had stayed behind to help the remaining people at the camps. Charles Stone stayed at Truckee Lake, while Charles Cady and Nicholas Clark stayed at Alder Creek. While Nicholas was out hunting, Charles Stone traveled to Alder Creek. He made plans with Charles Cady to head back to California. According to Stewart, Tamsin Donner, fearing for her children, arranged for Stone and Cady to take her daughters Eliza, Georgia, and Frances with them. It is thought that she offered them like $500 cash, paid them somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Stone and Cady took the 3 girls with them to Truckee Lake, but then left them there in the cabin with Keseberg and Lavina Murphy. So they took the money and ran. Then the 2 men took off to Bear Valley. Charles Cady later admitted that after 2 days on the trail, they passed those at Starved Camp, but did not stop to help.
What? That's shitty.
Well, they're already shitty. They left children.
Well, yeah, I know, but come on.
They overtook James Reed and the others within days. Several days later, at the Alder Creek camp, Nicholas Clark and Jean-Baptiste Trudeau agreed to leave for California together. But when they reached Truckee Lake, they discovered the Donner girls had been left there by Stone and Cady. The 2 men then returned to Alder Creek and informed Tamsin Donner, which that was decent of them.
Yes.
The 2 survivors of the snowshoe party, William Foster and William Eddy, started from Bear Valley to intercept James Reed. They took John Stark along with them. After a day of travel, they met up with James, helping his children struggle on towards Bear Valley. They were frostbitten, bleeding, but alive. Desperate to rescue their own children, Foster and Edie persuaded 4 men, by pleading and offering money, to go to Truckee Lake with them. During their journey, they found the 11 survivors at Starved Camp huddled all together around a fire that had sunk into a pit. The rescue team split into 2 groups. Foster, Eddy, and 2 others headed onward to Truckee Lake, while 2 other rescuers each took a child and headed back to Bear Valley. John Stark refused to leave the others at Starved Camp. He picked up 2 children and all the provisions and assisted the remaining Breens and Graves to safety. He would sometimes advance the poor emaciated children down the trail one by one, putting them down and then going back to carry the other children over and over until all the children were safely there.
Aww.
So there are some decent people here. On March 14th, Foster and Eddy finally arrived at Truckee Lake, but sadly found their children were dead. It's emotional because I'm a mom now, so I understand. And this is what I did while writing this entire thing. It just all of a sudden start crying. Keseberg told Eddy that he had eaten the remains of Eddy's son. Eddy swore to murder Keseberg if they ever met in California. George Donner and one of Jacob Donner's children were still alive at Alder Creek. Tamsin had just arrived at Truckee Lake to see her daughters that had been left behind by Stone and Cady. She chose to return to her husband, even though she was informed that no other rescue party was likely to be coming soon. The 3rd relief left with the 3 Donner girls, young Simon Murphy, Jean-Baptiste Trudeau, and Nicholas Clark. Lavina Murphy was too weak to leave, and Keseberg refused. 2 more rescue parties were eventually formed to evacuate any of the adults who might still be alive, but both turned back before even reaching Bear Valley, and no further attempts were made. On the 10th of April, almost an entire month since the 3rd rescue party left Truckee Lake, a group near Sutter's Fort organized a salvage party. to recover what they could of the Donner Party belongings. Those were sold, with part of the proceeds going to support the orphan Donner children. The salvage party found the Alder Creek tents empty except for the body of George Donner, who had died just days earlier. On their way back to Truckee Lake Camp, they miraculously found Louis Keseberg alive. According to him, Mrs. Murphy had died a week after the third rescue party left. A few weeks later, Tamsin Donner had arrived at his cabin on her way over the pass, soaked and visibly upset. Keseberg said he had put a blanket around her and told her to wait until morning, but she died during the night. The salvage party thought that his story was a little sus and found a pot full of human flesh in the cabin, along with George Donner's pistols, jewelry, and $250 in gold. They threatened to lynch him. He then confessed that he had hidden $273 of the Donner's money at Tamsin's suggestion, of course, so that it could one day go towards helping her children.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
The news of the fate of the Donner Party spread eastward by journalist Samuel Brennan. He had run into the salvage party as they were coming down the pass with Keseberg. By July of 1847, the story of the Donner Party had reached its way even to New York City, which news traveled slow back then.
Mhm.
So by getting there by July even, that's
good.
fast.
Yeah.
Reporting on the ordeal across the U.S. was heavily influenced by the enthusiasm for westward migration in the nation. Some newspapers buried the tragic story in small paragraphs, but several newspapers, including those in California, sensationalized and exaggerated in gory detail the cannibalism that took place. In other accounts, the members of the Donner Party were painted as heroes, and California as such a paradise that would be worthy of their sacrifices. In June of 1847, members of the Mormon Battalion under General Stephen W. Kearny buried the human remains and partially burned 2 of the cabins. The few who ventured over the pass in the next few years found bones, artifacts, and the cabin used by the Reed and Graves families. In 1891, a cache of money was found buried by the lake. It had probably been hastily stored by Mrs. Graves when she left with the Second Relief so she could return for it later. Over the following years, immigration west decreased, likely caused by fears of the ongoing Mexican-American War. An estimated 1,500 people migrated to California in 1846, but by 1847, that number had dropped to 450, and by 1848 to 400. The decrease was short-lived, though, as 1849 came around, along with the California Gold Rush. An influx of 25,000 people headed west once again. Most of the overland migration followed the Carson River, but a few 49ers used the same route as the Donner Party, recording descriptions of the sites into history. Unsurprisingly, Lansford Hastings received several death threats for his role in the tragedy. A migrant who had happened to cross before the Donner Party confronted him about all the difficulties that they had encountered taking his route, and reported, quote, "Of course he could say nothing, but that he was very sorry, and he meant well."
Whatever.
87 people entered the Wasatch Mountains as part of the Donner Party, but only 48 came out with their lives. Some with lasting scars caused by injury or frostbite, but no one escaped the scars caused by what they had seen or by what they had done in an attempt to survive. Only the Reed and Breen families made it out whole, not losing a single member of their families.
That's crazy.
That's remarkable.
Yeah.
The children of Jacob Donner, George Donner, and Franklin Graves were all orphaned. William Eddy was the sole survivor of his family, and most of the Murphy family had perished. Only 3 mules ever reached California, the remaining animals dying along the way. Most of everyone's possessions that once seemed so important were left behind, discarded. So from the Donner family, it's not going to go through each family and just go by what happened to each family member, because it kind of got confusing.
Yeah.
Who died, who survived,
Right.
when, because there's a lot of people in this party. So from the Donner family, George Donner, who was 60, died at Alder Creek Camp about March 27th, 1847. His wife, Tamsin, who was 45, stayed with her husband until he died and then attempted to cross the mountains on her own. About the day after George died, Tamsin died at the lake cabin of Lewis Keysburg. Their daughter, Frances, who was 6, was rescued by the 3rd Rescue Party. In 1858, she married William Wilder and had 5 children.
Aww.
Their 4-year-old daughter, Georgia, was rescued by the 3rd Rescue Team as well. After her arrival in California, she was taken in by a Swiss couple at Sutter's Fort, Christian and Mary Brunner. Georgia moved to Sonoma with the Brunners, and in 1855, she moved in with her half-sister, Elitha, and her husband. In 1863, she married W.A. Babcock, which makes me think of C.C. Babcock from The Nanny. Did you ever watch that show?
I did.
I loved that show. Daughter Eliza, who was only 3, was rescued by the 3rd Rescue Mission as well, and remained with her sister Georgia at the Brunners and at her half-sister Elitha's. In 1861, she married Sherman Houghton, a widower of her cousin Mary. Sherman and Eliza had 6 children. In the late 1870s, prompted by C.F. McGlashan's inquiries, Eliza began collecting accounts of the tragedy from her sisters. In 1911, she published her book, The Expedition of the Donner Party and Its Tragic Fate.
Good for her.
Yeah.
But 6 kids? Oof.
Well, and luckily, she was only 3
Yeah.
when this happened, so hopefully she doesn't have a whole lot of memory. I mean, I know tragic things tend to stick
Yeah.
more, but I hope she doesn't remember seeing a lot of what she probably did see.
Right.
George's daughter from a previous marriage, Elitha Cummey, who was 14, was rescued by the 1st Rescue Party. Shortly after her arrival at Johnson's Ranch, she married Perry McCoon, whose schooner had carried the Second Relief across the swollen Feather River. McCoon died in 1853, and Elitha married Benjamin Wilder and settled near present Elk Grove, California, which is just 15 miles south of Sacramento. George's daughter from a previous marriage, Leanna, 12, was rescued by the first wave of rescuers as well. She married John App on September 26, 1852, and had 3 children. Jacob Donner, who was 56, died at the Alder Creek Camp in mid-December of 1846. His wife, Elizabeth, who was 45, died at Alder Creek Camp as well in early of April 1847. Their son, George, who was 9, was rescued by the 1st Rescue Team. In 1862, he married Margaret J. Watson, and they had 8 children.
Jesus.
They like to pop them
I
out
was going
back
to say,
then.
man, they like to party.
Daughter Mary, who was 7, was rescued by the 3rd Rescue Team after being abandoned at Starved Camp by the 2nd Rescue Team. Her frostbitten and burned foot did heal.
Oh, good.
And she was taken in by John and Priscilla Cottrell in Santa Clara County. In 1859, she married Sherman O. Houghton. They had a daughter, but Mary died in 1860. Son Isaac, who was 5, was taken out by the second rescue team, but he died during the storm at Starved Camp about March 7th of 1847. Their 4-year-old son Samuel died at Alder Creek Camp around March 12th, 1847. Their 3-year-old son Lewis died at Alder Creek Camp about March 7th, 1847. So, oh man, just boom, boom.
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth's son from a previous marriage, Solomon Hook. Oh, so it wasn't Simon, it was Solomon earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I must mistyped it. Solomon.
Oh, I remember you saying something.
Yeah,
Okay,
because
Solomon.
I just had SLMON. So
I thought it was Simon too.
Yeah, I thought that was supposed to be an I, but I must have missed. I got claws on. Must have missed the O's.
Mm-hmm.
So Elizabeth's son from a previous marriage, Solomon Hook, who was 14, was rescued by the Second Relief. He worked at the Wolfskill Ranch and is buried at Winters, California. Elizabeth's son from a previous marriage, William Hook, who was 12, was taken out by the First Relief, but he died from overeating at Bear Valley on February 28, 1847. The single men who accompanied the Donners fared very poorly. Their teamster, Noah James, who was 20, was rescued by the First Relief. Teamster Samuel Shoemaker, who was 25, died at the Alder Creek camp in mid-December of 1846. The Donner's friend, John Denton, who was 28, died after being left behind by the first rescue team on February 24th, 1847. His body was found by the third rescue team. So that was it for the Donner family. Now the Reed family. James Reed, who was not the actual chosen leader of the Donner Party due to him being sort of a dick, but had convinced the group to take Hastings' route, arrived in California ahead of the party and mounted 2 rescue attempts. His wife and children remained with the party, mainly of whom blamed Reed for their predicament. Yet the Reeds were only one of 2 families to survive without any loss. James Fraser Reed, who was 46, was banished after killing the Graves' teamster John Snyder on October 5th, 1846, at Pawta Pass, now Golconda Summit, Nevada. He arrived safely at Sutter's Fort and attempted a rescue in November of 1846. After raising funds for and leading the second rescue mission, Reed settled his family in San Jose, where he farmed and was active in San Jose civic affairs. Reed, Margaret, Virginia, and Martha streets in downtown San Jose are named for the Reed family. Which that's kind of cool to have streets named after everybody in your family. The Reeds had 2 more children. James Reed was the only adult survivor of the Donner Party to publish an extensive account, beginning with J. Merriman's newspaper article based on Reed's notes in the December 9th, 1847 Illinois Journal, and Reed's own article, The Snowbound, Starved Immigrants of 1846, published in the Pacific Rural Press in 1871. James Reed died in 1874. His wife, Margaret W. Reed, who was 32, was rescued by the first rescue team, and she died in 1861. Their daughter, Martha, who went by Patty, she was 8 and was rescued by her father's second rescue team. She married Frank Lewis in 1856, and they had 8 children. Their son, James Jr., who was 5, was rescued by the first rescue mission. In 1879, he married Sarah Adams in San Jose. They had no children, and he died in 1901. Their 3-year-old son, Thomas, was rescued by the second rescue mission. He never married as well. Or he never married. Margaret's daughter from a previous marriage, Virginia Backenstow Reed, was 13 and was rescued by the first relief mission. Shortly after her arrival at Johnson's Ranch, she received a marriage proposal from Edward Pyle Jr. She rejected the offer, and Pyle married Mary Graves. In May 1847, Virginia wrote a first-hand account of the Donner Party in a letter that was published by the Illinois Journal in December of 1847. In 1850, Virginia married John Murphy and settled in San Jose. They had 9 children. In 1891, she wrote a more polished but less accurate account of the Donner Party, Across the Plains in the Donner Party for Century magazine. Margaret's mother, Sarah Keyes, 75, she died like way at the beginning on May 29th, 1846 at Alcove Spring near present Marysville, Kansas. She had the tuberculosis.
She had the ick.
Yeah. The employees who accompanied the Reeds fared no better than the Donner employees. Servant Eliza Williams, who was 25, was rescued by the first rescue team. 6 months after her rescue, she married. Eliza's half-brother, Bayless Williams,
I like that name.
Bayless.
Bayless.
Isn't that a disc jockey on the radio? It's on U93.
Yeah, Bayless and
something in the morning.
Yeah, I can't remember.
I don't remember. He died on December 15th, 1846 at the lake cabins. Teamster Milt Elliott, who was 28, died on February 9th, 1847 at the Murphy cabin by the lake. Teamster Walter Heron, 25, accompanied James Reed after Reed was banished by the party on October 5th, 1846. Heron had been a day's ride ahead with the Donners. Teamster James Smith, who was 25, died in mid-December at the Donners camp on Alder Creek. Friend Hiram Miller left the Reeds east of Fort Bernard near present Douglas, Wyoming on July 2nd, 1846 to accompany Edwin Bryant's pack train. He joined Reed on the second rescue mission and carried out Thomas Reed. He then returned with Eddie and Foster on the third relief mission. The Breen family. Unlike the Reeds, the Breen family crossed the plains without fanfare or fame. Patrick Breen's diary reflects the simple, honest approach to life and is the only contemporary written account of the winter entrapment. The newspaper that first published the diary did not even name the author, a contrast to the newspaper accounts of the Reeds. Like the Reeds, all the Breen family survived the winter. Patrick Breen, who was 51, was rescued by John Stark of the 3rd Relief after being abandoned by the 2nd rescue mission at Starved Camp. Upon his arrival in California, he befriended fellow Irish immigrant Martin Murphy Jr., who had a ranch on the Cosumnes River, south of present Elk Grove, California. In June 1847, Breen Murphy and several other settlers returned to the lake to salvage the Breen's wagons and goods. The Breens settled in San Juan Bautista on a ranch on the San Andreas Fault. In 1849, Patrick and Peggy had another son, William. Patrick Breen died in 1868. His wife, Margaret, who went by Peggy, was 40. She was rescued by John Stark of the 3rd Relief after being abandoned by the 2nd Relief at Starved Camp. She died in 1874. Their son, John, who was 14, was rescued by John Stark of the 3rd Relief after being abandoned by the 2nd Relief at Starved Camp. In 1849, he struck it rich in the gold rush, bringing home $12,000 in gold, which was a ton back then. In 1852, he married Leah Margaret Smith. They had 10 children.
Jesus Christ.
He died in 1903.
Jeez.
Edward, who was 13, was rescued by the first rescue mission. He married Catherine Sullivan and had 3 sons. Catherine died soon after, though. Edward married Mary Jane Burns, and they had 3 more children. Edward died in 1890. Patrick Jr., who was 11, was rescued by John Stark of the 3rd Rescue Team after being abandoned by the 2nd at the starved camp. In 1864, he married Amelia Anderson. They had 5 children who lived to adulthood. Patrick Jr. died in 1899. Simon, who was 9, was rescued by the first wave of rescuers. He married Marie Constance, some French name, Pedanson,
Wow.
and had 2 children. Simon died in 1899. Peter, who was 7, was rescued by John Stark of the 3rd Rescue Team after being abandoned by the 2nd at starved camp. He died in 1870 after a fall from the horse.
Aww. What a way to go out.
Yeah, you survive all that and then you fall
Get taken
off
out by a horse.
James, who was 5, was rescued by John Stark in the 3rd after being abandoned at starved. Carried Catherine McMahon and had a son who died young and 2 daughters. He became a Superior Court judge in San Benito County and later an assemblyman. He died in 1899. Isabella, who was just 1, was rescued by... How did she make it?
I was just going to say that. How does a 1-year-old make it and everybody else who could actually take care of themselves
kind of fend for themselves? Wow. Well, she was rescued by John Stark in the 3rd Relief after being left behind at the starved camp. In 1869, she married Thomas McMahon, brother of Catherine McMahon, who was married to Isabella's brother James. So they keeping it in the family there.
That's weird.
What? It's
I know.
Brother sister marrying brother sister.
I know, it's just weird to me.
We
had that
weird.
discussion before.
Yeah, it's not like...
I know, but to me, it's weird. I don't know, because I know they're not related, but I'm like, that's my brother-in-law, but now that's my brother-in-law-in-law. Like, it's weird. It's just weird to me.
Isabella died in 1935, and she was the last survivor of the Donner Party.
Aww.
So she was the youngest, and she was the last, of course, to pass away at old age.
That's good, though. I mean...
The Breen's friend and neighbor, Patrick Dolan, who was 35, died on December 26, 1846, at the Snowshoe Party's Camp of Death. Now the Eddy family. William Eddy was 28, survived the Snowshoe Party, and returned leading the 3rd Relief. In 1848, he married Mrs. P. Alfred, but they divorced in 1854 after having 2 children. In 1856, Eddy married Miss A. H. Party. William Eddy died in 1859. His original wife, Eleanor, was 25. She died at the lake cabins on February 7th, 1847. They were young, 28 and 25.
But the 1-year-old survived.
But the 1 year, yeah. Well, I guess they need less nourishment. Baby, maybe.
And they're the ones that are there. And as an adult, I would give my stuff to the children first.
Yeah. Their daughter, Margaret, who was 5, died at the lake cabins about the same time as her mother. His son, James, who was 3, died at the lake cabins in early March 1847. The Murphy family. The Murphy family suffered greatly, but those who survived did well in California with the gold rush.
That's good.
Vina Jackson Murphy, who was 50, died at the Murphy cabin at the lake in late March 1847. Son Landrum, who was 15, died at the Murphy cabin at the lake on January 30th, 1847. Their daughter, Mary, who was 13, was rescued by the First Relief. Just 3 months after her rescue, she married William Johnson. So she was 13. She married William Johnson, co-owner of Johnson's Ranch. He treated her badly, but as a poor orphan, she felt she had little choice. She soon divorced Johnson and married Charles
Cavald.
Cavoiled, Cavoiled, these French names. I don't. She married Charles Cavoiled. He founded a town on his land and called it Marysville. Mary died in 1867. Their son, Lemuel, who was 12, died on December 27th, 1846 at the Snowshoe Party's Camp of Death. Their son, William, who was 11, was rescued by the first wave of rescuers. He returned to Missouri to attend law school and then returned to Virginia City, Nevada to practice law. In 1880, he was the city attorney of Marysville, California. He and his wife had 7 children. In 1896, he presented a talk at Truckee, California to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Donner Party. Their son, Simon, who was 10, was rescued by the third rescue party. He returned to Tennessee, where he married and had 5 children. He died in 1873. The eldest Murphy daughter, Sarah, who was 23, survived the snowshoe party. She and her husband, William, had at least 5 children in California. Sarah's husband, William Foster, who was 28, survived the snowshoe party and returned with the third and fourth reliefs. Sarah's son, George Foster, who was 4, died at the Murphy cabin at the lake in mid-March 1847. The second eldest Murphy daughter, Harriet, who was 21, survived the snowshoe party. In 1847, she married M.C. Nye and settled in Marysville. Harriet's husband, William Pike, who was 25, died at Truckee Meadows, present Reno, Nevada, in late October of 1846. He was accidentally shot by his brother-in-law, William Foster.
Accidentally shot or accidentally shot?
Yeah. Harriet's daughter, Naomi Pike, 3, was rescued by the First Relief. She married John L. Schenck and lived until 1934, the second to last survivor of the Donner Party. Harriet's daughter, Catherine Pike, who was 1, died at the Murphy cabin at the lake on February 20th, 1847. So the Keseberg and Hardcoop. Louis Keseberg was the most infamous and vilified member of the Donner Party. Louis Keseberg, who was 32, was the last member of the party to be rescued by the Fourth Rescue Party. Upon his arrival at Sutter's Fort, he filed an action for defamation against Ned Coffeemeyer, presumably the allegedly defamatory statements were the story spread by the Fourth Rescue Party that Keseberg had killed Mrs. Donner for her money. The court found for Keseberg, but awarded him only $1 in damages. Keseberg captained Sutter's Launch, Sacramento, later opened a boarding house in Sacramento. Much was made of this, such as George McKinstry's 1851 letter to Captain Kern. Old Keseberg, the man-eater, opened up a restaurant, and somebody was like, I'd like to eat there. And another person was like, I wouldn't, because he's a man-eater. He's probably serving up people.
Ugh.
Keseberg later opened a brewery. C.F. McGlashan reported that the Kesebergs had 8 children in California, none of whom lived past 30 years of age. McGlashan wrote that Keseberg told him his 2 daughters were idiots. However, one family member disputes that account, reporting that daughters Bertha and Amelia married and had children, and Bertha lived to the age of 90 in Sacramento. Louis Keseberg died in 1895. His wife, Philippine, 23, was rescued by the First Rescue Mission. She died in 1877. Their daughter, Ada, who was 3, was taken out by the first relief but died around February 25th, 1847, near present King Vale. Their son, Lewis Jr., who was a newborn on the trail, died at the lake cabins on January 4th, 1847. Teamster Charles Berger, or Carl Berger, who was 30, died at the lake cabins on December 29th, 1846. The old Belgian Hardkoop, who was about 60 years old, had joined the Donner Party at Bridger Fort, was put out of the wagon by Keseberg on October 8th, 1846, near Winnemucca, Nevada, and failed to make it to camp. So Hardkoop was an old man that sat down because he couldn't
go anymore.
Yeah, he couldn't.
Yeah.
He couldn't go any
And
further.
he was only 60, and I was like you act like you're 90.
Yeah. Okay. So that's when they left behind because he just
gave up.
Yeah. Wolfinger, 26, never returned after abandoning his wagon at the Humboldt Sink around October 15th, 1846. Reinhardt and Spitzer, who accompanied Wolfinger, reported that Wolfinger was killed by indigenous people, but later confessed to killing him. His wife, Doris, who was 19, was rescued by the first rescue mission. Augustus Spitzer died at the Breen cabin at the lake on February 8, 1847. Joseph Reinhardt, who was around 30, died at the Alder Creek camp in mid-December 1846. William McCutcheon was a hero of the Donner Party. William McCutcheon, who was 30, left the party with Charles Stanton on about September 12, 1846. They rode ahead from Relief Springs, Nevada, to Sutter's Fort for supplies. McCutcheon joined James Reed on his unsuccessful relief mission on November of 1846 and on the second relief mission. He lived to an old age in San Jose. His wife Amanda, who was 30, survived the snowshoe party. Their daughter Harriet, who was 1, died at the lake cabins on February 2nd, 1847. The Graves families. The Graves family were the last people to join the Donner Party on the trail west. Franklin Graves, who was 57, died at the snowshoe party's camp of death on December 25th, 1846. His wife, on Christmas Day.
Oh,
I just realized that.
Me too.
His wife, Elizabeth, who was 47, was taken out by the second relief, but abandoned at Starved Camp, where she died during the first week of March 1847. Their daughter, Mary, who was 20, survived the snowshoe party. Just 3 months after her escape, she married Edward Pyle. Pyle was killed a few years later, and in 1851, married J.T. Clark. They settled in Tulare County, where they had 7 children.
Man, they go big.
Yeah.
Like, go big or go home. But they went big.
Then that was the way it was back then, because the survival rate of children were just not high.
Right.
And a lot of times, this is when people usually just stayed home and worked the field and, they needed all the free labor. She died in 1891. Their son, William, who was 18, was rescued by the First Relief. He became a blacksmith in Calistoga, California, and he was a valuable informant for McGlashan for him to locate the cabin sites. William's recollections were colored by his bitterness towards the other party members, Reed in particular. Their daughter, Eleanor, who was 15, was rescued by the First Relief. In 1849, she married William McDonnell. They settled in Knights Valley, Sonoma County, and had 9 children. Daughter Lavina, who was 13, was rescued by the First Relief. In 1856, she married John Cyrus. They settled in Calistoga and had 5 children. Their daughter Nancy, who was 9, was rescued by John Stark of the 3rd Relief after being abandoned at Starved Camp. In 1855, she married Reverend R.W. Williamston and settled near Los Gatos, Santa Clara County, where they had at least 4 children. Their son Jonathan, who was 7, was rescued by John Stark after being left at Starved Camp. Their son Franklin Jr., who was 5, was taken out by the 2nd Relief and abandoned at Starved Camp, where he died about March 11th, 1847. That's kind of weird to have a junior after another son. Usually the eldest son is the junior.
Right, which is usually how it goes. But I know quite a few people who have older kids named whatever, and then their second one is named Junior. And it's
That's
weird
so
to me.
weird. Yeah, usually it goes the firstborn son
is the
is
junior.
his junior.
Yeah. And the only thing I can think of when you say Franklin Jr. is Frank Jr. from Friends.
I don't remember that.
When he named him Junior Jr.
Oh, Phoebe's brother. Yes,
Frank
Junior Jr.
Instead of the third. Cracks me up every time.
I forgot all about that. There was Frank Jr. Jr. They named one Chandler, didn't they?
One Chandler.
And what was the third? Because it was triplets.
Uh-huh. That's going to drive me crazy. I'll look it up.
Daughter Elizabeth, who was 1, was rescued by John Stark of the 3rd Relief after being abandoned at Starved Camp. Sadly, she died shortly after arriving at Sutter's Fort. Their eldest daughter,
Leslie.
Frank
Jr., Leslie, and Chandler.
Huh. Do you know that show would not fare well today?
No, it would not.
It was so...
And it's such a good show. I still watch it.
I like watching the little clips I see on Facebook all the time.
Yeah.
That was like our Thursday night routine. My mom and I, we'd watch Friends and Gilmore Girls. Those were our 2 shows.
Gilmore Girls.
Yes. Good times.
Yes.
Their eldest daughter, Sarah, 22, survived the snowshoe party. Sarah's husband, Jay Fosdick, which is an unfortunate name. Oh, Fosdick.
But still.
Or maybe it's Fosdick. Probably Fosdick. Who was 23, tried to escape with the snowshoe party. He died the first week of January 1847 near Iowa Hill. Teamster John Snyder, 25, was killed by James Reed in a fight at Pawta Pass, present Golconda Summit, Nevada, on October 5th, 1846. Stanton, a single man with no relatives among the Donner Party, Stanton became the greatest hero of the tragedy by his selfless sacrifice. The 2 Indians who accompanied Stanton from Sutter's Fort did not survive either. Charles Stanton, who was 35, left the party with William McCutcheon on or about September 12, 1846. They rode ahead from Relief Springs, Nevada to Sutter's Fort for supplies. Stanton returned with 7 mules loaded with provisions and 2 indigenous people from Sutter's Fort. He rejoined the party the last week of October of 1846 along the Truckee River. He piloted the snowshoe party until he became too weak to keep up. About December 21st, 1846, he failed to come up to the snowshoe party's camp near 6 Mile Valley. Lewis died or was killed by the snowshoe party on about January 9th, 1847, in the foothills above Bear River. Salvador died or was killed by the snowshoe party on or about January 9th, 1847, in the foothills above Bear River. So those were the 2 indigenous people. Halloran, Antonio, and Trudeau. These men joined the Donner Party along the trail. Luke Halloran, who was 25, died at the Lower Wells, present Grantsville, Utah, on August 25th, 1846. He left about $1,500 in coin to George Donner, which was probably the $500 per child offered by Tamsin Donner to the members of the Second Relief to carry out her three daughters. Antonio, about 23 years old, died at the Snowshoe Party's Camp of Death on December 25th, 1846, so another Christmas day. Jean-Baptiste Trudeau, who was 18, was rescued by the Third Relief. He stayed with the Donner girls after the rescue. In 1847, he was quoted by the U.S. Navy Lieutenant Wise recounting some very lurid tales of cannibalism. It is not known if the quotations are accurate, exaggerated, or fabricated. Trudeau visited the Donner girls periodically over the next 40 years and continued to assure them and newspapers that cannibalism had not occurred at Alder Creek. He married and had 3 sons. He died in 1910 at Marshall in Tamales Bay, Marin County. While the story of the Donner Party is a harrowing tale of human endurance and desperation, what's perhaps just as chilling is what came after. Over a century later, long after the snow had melted and the cabins had crumbled, whispers began to emerge. Claims that the echoes of that tragic winter never truly faded. Locals, hikers, and even park rangers have reported strange occurrences in the area, as if the land itself remembers. Could it be the lingering energy of suffering and loss, or is something else haunting the place where so many lives were lost? The traumatic suffering endured both by those who died and those who survived was so great, says Barbara Smith, author of Ghost Stories of California, that resonances from their experiences can still be felt in and around the area where the group wintered. Smith writes of one woman's creepy experience in the spring of 1988. The woman, only identified as Elizabeth in order to preserve her privacy, started feeling sensations while driving toward Donner Summit, excited, as if she was going to be seeing dear friends whom she hadn't seen in years. She was confused by this, as she was a practical sort, a history buff, and she didn't have any friends she was meeting. The closer she got to Donner Memorial Park, the more intense the sensations got, including odors, what the campsite and the pioneers smelled like, and tears that sprang unbidden from their horrible plight. Once at the park, Elizabeth had overpowering feelings of being watched and not being alone, even though no one else was in the park at the time. But these feelings only occurred at the site where it was thought George Donner and his wife Tamsin had their tent 152 years earlier. Could the presence Elizabeth felt be the ghost of this woman? By all accounts, Mrs. Donner was an intelligent, resourceful person who first sent her children ahead to find their way to civilization, then left herself once her husband died and the last member of the Donner Party to leave the place. No one knows, but there have been others who have had odd experiences regarding this point in time in history. A woman identified as Joan Williams was hypnotically regressed to the past life by paranormal researcher Dr. Michael Newton in the early 1990s, only to have Donner Party survivor Patty Reed come through. She said she was 8 years old, cold, and in the mountains. Further, she said she had been carried out of the camp by a Frenchman. When asked what was most responsible for the tragedy, her answer was Hastings, which turned out to be the name of the ill-advised shortcut the Donner Party took that ultimately stranded them. Newton discovered that the lady he regressed had no knowledge of the Donner Party in her waking state. Patty Reed had died in 1923 at the ripe old age of 85. While not a ghostly presence in the normal sense of the word, the essence of her seemed to live on. Reincarnation, maybe, in Joan Williams? Then there's the story of a skier who got seriously disoriented while skiing alone at Sugar Bowl Ski Resort, close to where the Donner Party had their last camp. After a day of wandering about looking for help, he claims a woman skier appeared, led him to a camp of people who asked him to do work the next day for them, alone. When he went back to the camp later that day, it wasn't there.
Dun, dun, dun.
There wasn't even any signs that it had ever existed. Everything and everybody had disappeared. Creepy for sure, but at least not threatening. And that, my friends, is the Donner Party. Wow.
Yeah, like I have no words. That was a lot, and it was very sad and very,
very sad. And just, it hadn't needed to happen.
No, not at all. Because some guy was being selfish and wanted to.
They could have gone the normal route and everyone would have been fine.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess that's not a guarantee, but most likely everyone would have been fine.
Right.
Or they could have just stayed where they were in Illinois and Ohio and not have tried going out west.
Yep.
To everyone's demise. This was a rough one for me. Like, I cried so much. I cried so much again. I could cry right now.
It's really sad, especially those children. Like, being turned away or being killed or
being eaten.
Yeah.
Surviving because you're eating your father. Like, and then later on, they tried to retract the claims that cannibalism happened. But it had to have happened.
Because if it hadn't happened, a lot more people would be dead.
Yeah.
For sure.
And nobody is going to just say, oh, like in the beginning, oh, yeah, we had to cannibalize one another. Like, nobody would have admitted that if it hadn't happened.
Right.
Like, in the beginning. Like, it's horrible, but I understand why it had to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I probably would have. People probably would have eaten me first because I'd feed more people.
Oh, stop it.
Oh, man. But this was the end of the Donner story. Next week, Amanda's going to be bringing us something, which we're excited to have her back in action.
Yes, yes.
So we'll look forward to that. If you guys have any ghost stories, any glitches in the Matrix, any fairy fucking that's been going on, have you seen Bigfoot? Do you have any cryptids in your local area? Let us know. Send them our way.
Mm-hmm.
You can email us directly at spinechillingchatspodcast@gmail.com, or you can go to our website, www.spine-chillingchatspodcast.com, and submit them online there. You can check out our merch as well. We have a lot of cool merch there.
We do. We just made a new shirt.
Yeah, people are starting to buy, so it's really fun to see. Hopefully we'll see people around town wearing them.
Yes.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yes, yes.
So check it out. Help support us.
We love doing this.
We do.
So, help us out.
We have a lot of fun.
Yes.
Last week we did a ghost tour, a little interview at the Bisa Mansion. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out, please do. It was a really cool experience.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to be doing a hunt with them in June. So we're excited for that too.
Yes.
Please comment, like, subscribe, share. You can check us out on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. If you're just listening to this, we have video. I add a lot of pictures usually to the videos so you can see who or what I'm talking about or Amanda's talking about.
And
so
we have, we're on all the podcasts.
Yes, anywhere you can get a podcast, we're there. Yeah. So check us out. Well, you're already checking us out.
Right. So keep checking us out.
Yeah, and tell your friends to check us out. Tell your friends,
tell your 90-year-old grandma.
Yeah.
We don't discriminate.
Yeah. We accept everyone.
Yes.
So this is it. Please, again, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So please, if you are in need of help or you know somebody that's in need of help, don't be scared to get it. Don't hesitate. It's a big
Reach
deal.
out 988, or if you're not comfortable talking to them, we don't judge. You can message us. We will help you.
I will talk to anybody
any way that we can.
Just not in person because I'm shy. I'm extremely shy.
So,
but I'll
please reach out to somebody.
Yeah,
somebody.
Well, we hope you enjoyed this. We hope you come back, and most of all, we hope you keep it spooky. Bye, guys.
Bye.